funny because, when I think about all the big shifts that happen in people or in business, they don't usually, I think, happen on like a Zoom call, right? Like a lot of times these big shifts happen when we step away from what our regular environments are and where we normally are working. And we see things differently. We experience things differently. We get a different energy into us than what we're typically used to. That's what we did with our team, bringing it out to Durango when we've had team meetings to be able to create big shifts in our team. It's what you've done with masterminds, right? Bringing them into a new environment. I mean, you've had so many people come out to Durango. I guess it's not just the strategy that you learn when you go to Durango. It's also the setting, right?
Yeah, I think it ends up feeling, just being here feels like a retreat. And the quality of the people that we have come in is just extraordinary. And like when you're around extraordinary people being led in I think we do a pretty damn good job of leading them. I've done probably somewhere around 100 of these small workshops, if we count all the masterminds and the various workshops, our launch intensive. So I've got a little bit of experience. Dan's got a little bit of experience. We know what we're doing. We know how to throw a workshop. We know how to throw a party. And you get really great people together. And whether it's a formal mastermind or not, that idea of the mastermind, comes from Napoleon Hill that he wrote about in Think and Grow Rich, of you get a number of minds working together on something. And it's way more powerful than any one of us can be. Dan and I have planned more than $20 million launches. And then we've helped out on so many more. But if you get like 8 or 10 really smart people working on an idea, they'll do way beyond what Dan could do or what I could do. And it's just fact.
And there's power in taking a trek that's harder to get to than normal, right? Like being in like a big hub like Dallas, like maybe everyone can get to Dallas, right? But to have to take a smaller plane to a smaller place where you're in an airport that's much smaller and it's not as direct, and you have to, take a little bit more of that trek to get away from something else. It's like, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's Everest or something like that to get to. It's not that hard, but the idea of going to a place that's further away, that's harder, that not everyone will be accessing, not everyone is going to this energy. I think there's real power in the people who make that trek, right? That are willing to go a little bit further than normal to get to a place that has something special at the top, right? It's like getting to the peak of a mountain. It's like getting to the Everglade in the jungle or something like that, or the oasis in the desert. It's finding those places.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we'll sometimes end up talking to people, and people will talk about the convenience of running a business from a place like this. And in some ways, it is a little less convenient, It's a little bit harder to, we don't necessarily have access to the greatest internet speeds forever. We don't have access to hire local talent quite in the same way. But what you trade off in some elements of, shall we say, like logistical convenience, we gain access to inspiration convenience. It's interesting too. Like, I feel like we often get asked questions about just the logistics of running a business from somewhere that's, and like you said, it's not like we're out in the middle of nowhere. Like, we're a 40-minute flight to multiple major cities, multiple international hubs. So it's not like, I don't mean to make it sound like, yeah, you have to go on this epic, like, multi-day expedition trek to get to Durango. But it is a smaller town, right? So yeah, you can get super fast internet if you're right downtown on Main Street. But if you're set a short ways away from Main Street and the place that has amazing views, yeah, you don't necessarily have access to the highest quality fiber connection internet. And if we're looking to hire somebody to run our live streams, it's not like there's a huge pool of industry talent here in town. Might have to fly somebody in. So there are parts that are a little less logistically convenient, but there's a lot of access to inspiration convenience. Being in this sort of business, this sort of knowledge business or wisdom business or the inspiration business, honestly, like there is a ton of convenience here. Like if we want to get a really, really cool photos, really cool videos shot. Like, we have enormous access to cool things like that. If we want to host a really special experience for people coming in for events, like Jeff just mentioned our Launch Intensive, we have this Launch Intensive event coming up in June where we're going to have a small group of like 50 entrepreneurs coming in to work directly with Jeff and me and Justin on our campaign design team and planning their launches. And it's like, okay, we could host that somewhere. I mean, we could host that in LA or something. We could host that in a major city. We could host that in Dallas. It would be simpler for people to get to, but we can deliver such a cool experience, such an inspirational experience, having them come here, coming into this building where, like Jeff said, all these amazing ideas, all these amazing launches have been planned from. And I do think that there's something to the environment in which you're doing creative work. Creativity can happen anywhere, right? But I would be hard pressed to imagine having the same sort of creative ideas sitting in a corner of a hotel lobby as you would sitting out by the fire underneath the Milky Way. Different sort of experience. And it really does bring an extra little something to things, to the point where even we feel like it's above and beyond worth it. Hosting events and bringing people into what we consider to be a really special place.
A few years ago, a college roommate from 40 years ago called me up and said, "Hey, Jeff, he's an avid fly fisherman. I've gone fly fishing a few times, but I'm still a newbie." And he's an avid fly fisherman. He calls me up and said, "I've got this really cool trip booked in Alaska. You want to come fishing with me?" And I thought, that sounds interesting. I'll be out in Alaska. It'll be cool. I'll be, on rivers and lakes. I like that. I haven't seen my friend in a few years. So I went with him. And we flew into Anchorage on a regular plane. And then at Anchorage, we got on this little plane that held maybe 12 people. And we flew in that plane to Lake Iliamna, a little town. Lake Iliamna, I think it has a population of 103 people. So we went from the regular jet airliner to a 12-person prop plane. And there we were met by a pilot who put us into a float plane on the lake that held like 6 people. And then we flew out to Intricate Bay, this tiny little bay, where we were in this little lodge with 12 other people who were like the most amazing, most cool people you could ever imagine, because they'd done this, flew into Lake Iliamna in this tiny plane, and then got into an even smaller plane and flew out there. And even though I was a newbie and they were all world-class fisher people, they just welcome me because they're awesome people, because there's these hurdles. And then the next morning, we got into an even smaller plane that only held my roommate and the pilot. There's 3 of us in this plane. And then just the 3 of us flew out to another tiny little lake, got out of the plane, and again, a float plane. And then we started to walk up this tiny little creek. And it was just the 3 of us. And the fishing was ridiculous. Like, we caught more fish than I could possibly count. Of course, it's all catch and release. You catch them and you release them. No fish are being killed. And unbelievable fishing. There's grizzly bears. It was just incredible. And I'm like, I'm a complete newbie. But it was like I threw a line in the water and a fish is jumping onto the hook, because there's no competition at the end of the road. When you go from a plane that holds 200 people to one that holds 12 people to one that holds 6 people to one that holds 3 people, there's no competition at the end of the road. And I just think, like, when people come here and they spend the time to come to Durango and sit in a room in communion, like we're going to do with this intensive with Dan and Justin and myself and just 50 people, there's no competition at the end of the road. And I think that's where breakthroughs are made. And that's where unbelievable work gets done. And like Dan said, you could be creative anywhere. And I have been. And Dan, we've been creative all over the world in all kinds of environments. But I think there is a piece of people coming out to our hometown and just making huge breakthroughs.
Hey, Launch family, one more thing before you go. You heard us talk about it throughout the episode. It's the Launch Intensive. This is where you get to go into Colorado, Durango, work with Jeff Walker, Dan Walker, and Justin Livingston for 2 days, and you'll leave with a world-class launch plan. Now, this launch intensive will sell out quickly, so go to getyouLaunched.com right now to secure your seat. That's getyouLaunched.com. We'll see you on the next episode.